This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Friday Lunch Show with Morgan Whitfield and Todd Brennan. It is Friday, September 13th, and today we are discussing dynamic department planning with our special guest, Emily Folorunshu. We'll be looking at how to strategically plan as a middle leader and do it well.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're excited to start today by discussing one of my favorite things, especially when I look back at my time as a middle leader, and that is looking at strategic department planning. And I feel really honored because I have a dear friend that's joining us today. Emily Folorunshu is absolutely incredible. I've seen her speak and I've seen her in action as a teacher. She's an author, and right now she has just begun a new job where she is the head of history and politics at a premier school. So Emily, we are extremely excited to have you and your expertise on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, Morgan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, perfect. It feels so weird to be in as a guest rather than like a host, but I haven't done this in a while, but absolutely love Teacher Talk Radio, and thank you so much for your lovely introduction.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. Why don't you, for those of you who haven't heard Emily on Teacher Talk Radio before, it will be a treat. Emily, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and what you are up to these days?
So I've been teaching, it's my 9th year now. Got into, teaching because I just was one of those people that always knew what I wanted to do, and I've always wanted to be a teacher. And as cheesy, I should say, as it is, it was watching Miss Honey on Matilda. It's my absolute favourite film. Absolutely love Matilda. It's one of my favourite films, and also Freedom Writers, and just seeing teachers, on the TV making a difference, and it just really cemented that idea of being a teacher. And so I actually did, my degree was education and history studies, so it was a joint honours, and then worked in a fantastic school in London, was there since my NQT year, and then I hit a wall, and I was just a bit like, I felt burnt out, in honesty. It was COVID. I felt really burnt out from COVID, and the residue of COVID didn't really leave me. And I always wanted to try international teaching, and I thought, why not go to Dubai? And yeah, was in Dubai for about a year, and now I'm in Abu Dhabi, and it's different to that of the UK and London, but enjoyable, I suppose, and it's taught me a lot personally.
I think that's really funny. We've gone through similar journeys. I think I had this idealized version of being a teacher because both my parents were teachers. I taught in Canada and the UK before. Yeah, I taught in Canada and the UK before coming out to the Middle East, and now I'm in Southeast Asia. So I think we've all had different experiences at different types of schools. I thought that I'd just start off by asking you and Todd about your experience in department development planning. And I think that we can come at it from different angles because we've all been within a department and we've all led departments. So we've all kind of seen it from both perspectives. So why don't we just start with Todd? Todd, why don't you tell us just a little bit about your background when it comes to department planning, and especially your role because you were the head of a core subject as well?
Yeah, so I was head of English for 6 years. And I suppose in that time, you go through different stages of departmental development. I think one thing that I'd say is it all starts with vision. My old head of secondary used to say that the middle leaders in the school had to be, if not the best teacher in the department, at least, in and around that conversation. And I think I agree with that, because a lot of it for me comes down to knowing exactly how good things can be. So it starts really with me with vision and what you know is achievable. And then obviously you're breaking it down year on year and thinking about how close are we in area X. The beginning then from that vision outwards, I always think has to start with curriculum. I think that's something you have to come back to again and again. And that's obviously done then through your assessment model. Is your assessment model verifying that your curriculum is fit for purpose? And then over the years, you can start to triangulate whether your assessment data is actually accurate and whether then your curriculum's working as intended. And I don't just mean your what we might refer to as your lag measures, but also your lead measures. So I often say that data in the wrong way. They think about it in terms of numbers on a spreadsheet. Actually, data from your teachers, informal data is pretty important too. And in class low stakes quizzes can form this conversation as well. So for me, it starts with that vision, and then it goes to looking at your curriculum and your assessments and your provision. And then obviously, you've got your more practical terms like resourcing the department, and then you have the people that are going to lead it, the classic, get the right people on the bus, sat in the right seats. And for me, as we've discussed previously, Morgan, that was for me about getting quite disagreeable people in the room. I quite liked that. I liked that kind of contentious conversations in department meetings, so that, if there was something that perhaps I'd been obscuring or that some members of the team had been obscuring, there were people in the room that were going to call it out. And so that we weren't kind of hiding our, the classic one is the teenager tidying their bedroom, we weren't shoving things underneath the bed and in the cupboards to pretend that the room was tidy. So people management obviously is massive within that. It's a continual process, and I really liked at the end of the year kind of sitting down and seeing how close we were to this sort of vision of heaven as a department, this idealized version of the department we were. And I'd spend quite a lot of time over the summer looking at that and making those predictions before the results came out and seeing how close we were to those predictions. Kind of informed then rewriting the department improvement plan on a year-to-year basis. So that's, for me, department improvement plan. It's a continual cycle of reflection, but it has to be based on an idealized vision of what it can become. I'd say that's pretty comprehensive, but I've probably missed something.
No, I think that you've hit so many kind of high points that I sincerely believe in as well. I love what you said about high expectations. I think that when you do have high expectations of yourself and your department, that vision becomes extremely ambitious. I do agree about starting with curriculum. I think that that's pretty key. That's what drives a department. And I also think that when we look at the honesty that it requires to strategically develop a department, you have to take a really good close look at yourselves, and the team has to be able to have that self-awareness to say, well, this is how we can improve, and this is where we could get to if we all pitch in and move in the same direction. I think
Sorry, just to cut you off, and it's really hard for someone who's never seen an outstanding department running or has never been able to lead. And I'm not just talking Ofsted terms here or ADEC terms in our case in the UAE. I'm talking about what is genuinely outstanding. It's really hard for people that haven't seen that to lead change within a school and lead a department, because they just don't know what they've seen they believe is good enough. It's only when you've kind of worked in those settings that you know what real high performance within your domain is, and that's really has to be the start point for me. Sorry.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree, actually. When I think about the learning curve that comes with being a head of department, I think that I was in an extremely lucky position because I was a head of department at a startup school, which meant that I got to build my department from scratch. I was empowered and given free rein to build the department of my dreams, and I had fantastic staff that were with me. But that doesn't mean that I knew everything or that I had seen a high performance department in action. And the thing that I did learn was while I might be a subject expertise and while I was a great teacher, I didn't have the necessary skills to be a great head of department. And I had to be mentored and borrow those skills from amazing heads of department that I saw around me. So the head of MFL, who was down the hall from me, that is someone that I learned from a lot. The head of maths, who was simply spectacular and incredibly organized, who systematized things, that was somebody who I borrowed from. I think you need to look at other middle leaders because that's how you learn how to be a great head of department. So that is kind of my experience. Emily, why don't we talk to you, just because you are head of department right now and you've just come new into the role. Can you tell me, coming new into a role, thinking about, oh my goodness, I'm just starting to know my department, its resources, the people, the school, and you're starting to make your department plans for the year. What is your baseline? What are the questions that you're asking?
So I just wanted to touch on something that both of you, what you and Todd mentioned, because they're really, really good points. Number one, about Todd mentioned about the fact that he employs naysayers. I think that's a really good of leaders, because some leaders like yes men, and that's not gonna drive improvement. And what you said about kind of like creating your outstanding mental model of being a leader, especially a middle leader, through observing others, and that's mostly how we learn, because it provides those concrete models within our minds. But yeah, going back to your question, no, it just made me think what both of you just said. Actually, it's like yeah. So sorry, going off in a tangent, but talking about. Okay, so I've been middle leader, in London, and it was easier to transition to only because I had been in that school since I was an NQT. Started off as a teacher, then Key Stage 3 lead, Key Stage 4 lead. I forgot to mention as well that I was actually there as a sixth former as well, student.
Oh, wow. So you know school inside out.
Yeah, literally. And my head of department was the reason why I became a history teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher. I didn't know if it was primary or secondary or what subject. I considered, French, because I was good at languages. But then, had Miss Brunskill. She was amazing. I wanted to be a history teacher. She was my line manager as a teacher, then line manager as a head of department. So she's been with me throughout my career. It was easier to transition into middle leadership because I knew the systems. I knew the logistics, knew the curriculum well. So I didn't have that extra kind of layer in terms of the workload of learning a new specification, learning the way examiners assess AO1, AO2, plus getting to grips with something like ISABs. I didn't have those extra layers. So my cognitive load when it came to that change was quite slim, to be honest. Whereas here, now being a middle leader in a new context, in a new framework as well, because I'm not dealing with Ofsted, I'm dealing with something different, in a new school, different systems, and different priorities. It has been a bit more difficult in the sense that I'm learning new content for some exam classes. So, for example, yesterday I was sitting down doing an exam question myself because I need to ensure that I've got, a comprehensive understanding before I teach the year 13s, those AO1, AO2, AO3 skills. So that, and then trying to just finish my CEF actually, but trying to manage the department at the same time. It's like all my boundaries that I've put in place for ensuring a work-life balance and well-being is out the window because my laptop's shutting at like 9-10 p.m. working every single day. But with that being said, it is enjoyable, and it just comes with the territory of starting somewhere new. So hopefully my boundaries for workload will be reinstated. So I guess my biggest challenge in terms of leading the department in a new setting is it's just the many layers that you have to come to grip with, and because you're managing a department as well, your time to spend getting to grips with the subject knowledge as well as the procedural knowledge in terms of exam application is quite difficult. But with that being said, because I left my last job quite early, I did have time to ask questions in regards to different policies that the school has. So I kind of was fast tracked just a tad bit more into the systems of the school, and the head of academics and the senior leadership have been extremely supportive. Like, they're so good, really supportive, great to work under, just making sure that I've settled in well. The team's really lovely, and I'm quite lucky in the sense, like you, Morgan, in the sense that I've pretty much got a new team. So I've just said to everyone, here's the curriculum. I'm a bit of a control freak, so that's one of my weaknesses as a leader. I have to admit, I'm a really control freak. I'm OCD with certain things. So I know I need to be a bit more diplomatic. Let's all sit together and create a vision or whatever. But I did do that, and the team did run with it. And I think, I guess they kind of appreciated it because it's one less thing for them to do. So I did come in with all the resources and stuff like that. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Sorry, Morgan. I feel like I'm just talking.
You've given me so much to think about, actually, because I think all of a sudden you've sparked some ideas about what I want to discuss kind of further into the show. But it's the idea of change management, the fact that as middle leaders, you drive the school as much as senior leaders might be able to push some things. Unless middle leaders are really behind it and have buy-in and are very, very involved in getting their department to the place that they want it to be at, then nothing happens. All initiatives will fail because middle leaders are the linchpin. And they have a lot of power because they're the ones that make sure that there's motivation that's built up in the department. So if you are saying this is the vision for the department, we're moving forward, the middle leader is the one that has to galvanize the troops and make sure that they feel that they are on board. And the middle leader also has all of these competing demands. So when you are looking at prioritizing, one of the questions I was going to ask you and Todd actually was, well, there's whole school priorities, and the way that you structure your priorities as a department, do you think that they should fall in line exactly with whole school priorities in order to make sure that that larger ship is moving in the same direction? Or are you really looking first at the specific needs of your department and your team? Because I find it's really funny. We want to do long-term change. And a lot of the time that doesn't mean following what the whole school does. It also doesn't mean that you are being very reactionary and just looking at the GCSE results that came in 3 weeks ago to plan your entire year or to develop your department. So taking all those into account, Todd, why don't you answer first, then Emily? What do you think you have to take into consideration when you are planning your department?
Yeah, well, I'll talk first to your question about whether there should be alignment. I think total alignment would be questionable, but equally, if you've got a lack of alignment, you're just creating a sort of Sisyphean task for yourself of impossibility. There should be alignment. I mean, unless the senior leadership team, for some reason, has taken leave of their senses, I think there probably will be alignment. But if you're going to go off and be a silo on your own, I think that is potentially very damaging to your team's morale, potentially very damaging to what you're trying to achieve in the long run. And if there isn't alignment with the senior leadership team, I'd hope that you were bringing that to their attention, that you'd noticed the specific need in advance. That was this just specific to your department? So yeah, total alignment either way, I would be a bit wary of, because there are going to be specific needs, but a level of misalignments is really, really challenging to lead, because your team are going to naturally ask questions. Maths aren't doing this. Why are we doing this? And you've spoken there about galvanizing. I think that's going to make it difficult. So maybe a sort of 80-20, a sort of Pareto distribution there of 20%. Look, this is just something we're working on. I think the whole school will follow us in the end on this, because this is something I've noticed that's a bit extra. But actually, this 80% is really going to make sure that we're meeting all the basics, so that when we've done our extra bit, we look absolutely superb and we're serving the children. And that, my colleague, and I won't name him just in case, but it's a fairly safe comment, I probably could name him, said to me, the North Star has to be the kids at the end of the day this week. And I thought, yes, I like that. So
Yeah.
the alignment, 100%, but if there's a strong feeling that there's a misalignment, then I think that has to be discussed. There has to be dialogue, but I'd worry about that if it was a heavy misalignment there. I will
I
also
think
say
there's
as
that
well,
balance. Yeah, you
yeah,
want to be aligned, but also I've seen departments that have charged ahead and been incredibly innovative, and then waited for the entire school to follow them. The immediate thing that comes to mind is that I saw departments who embraced Google Classroom far, far before COVID, and they were eons ahead when all of a sudden COVID hit. But it was because they had gone ahead with a platform that wasn't
yeah.
quite endorsed or really well known by senior leadership yet. So that's just one example. But yeah, I think you do want to make sure that you have aligned with school priorities. Otherwise, what's the point? But there's so much to be said for innovation.
And that sounds like your 20% to me there. That sounds fine. That's your cherry on top. That sounds like, we're going to push on this because this will be there for us as we build forward. I'll also say, Emily, you spoke about control freak. My good friend, who's a lawyer, taught me the phrase control enthusiast. It's a rebranding of the same thing, but it's just a little bit more gentle on yourself. So I'm gonna pass that little gem on to you because it was given to me. I think as a middle leader, there is an element of control enthusiasm, and I think that has to be there. But over time, it's the needs of the team, isn't it? There are times when the team needs you to be enthusiastic about control, and a time when they need you to be. I'm not a big fan of the idea of servant leadership as such, but they need you to have two ears and one mouth and actually speak for them and listen carefully to them. So I think it's moments within a team rather than a particular style. You may have come in and felt, I've got this really strong vision and I'm going to take us there. And I think that's absolutely fine. But yeah, you're a control enthusiast, Emily. You're not a freak.
Thanks, Paul. It makes you feel better.
It made me feel better when I was given that as well.
Oh.
I think it's really funny, actually, just listening to you describe different personalities. I think a big thing about development planning is you really have to take into account the people that are in your team. And I think that the group dynamics of departments can be so weird and strange because people are hired at different times. They have different pedagogical viewpoints. Some of them have been teaching the same subjects in the same way for 20 years, and others are brand new to the team. So the way that you plan actually really depends a lot on those who are in your department. And you also have those personality types. I love that you would describe yourself as a control enthusiast. I think all three of us could fit easily under that title and hold that mantle proudly. Emily, when I think of you, I always think of like an expert teacher. So someone whose subject knowledge is amazing. And when I've seen your resources, I know that what you do is that you have an expert understanding of the curriculum that you teach. So there are different kind of types of, I guess, people that are within a department of different varying levels of experience. How do you take that into account when you're planning your department? How do you do kind of a SWOT or a needs assessment, or is it just kind of intuitive when you're planning?
Yeah, so when I did the curriculum for my new school, I can just get a vibe from a school, from the website, and I did actually go in for the interview, so I got the vibe from the school, and I was quite familiar as well, and also speaking to Todd about the requirements of what ADEX kind of looking for. So you try to play the game a bit when you build a curriculum. So one of the frameworks is about innovation. Add something about innovation there. One of the frameworks about sustainability. Add a skill work about sustainability. So we've got an inquiry on how did climate shape world history, looking at ancient civilizations. and stuff. What else is another one? Something that I really want to do is something on people of determination. So we've got an inquiry on experiences of people of determination within, or for our UK listeners, that it's, people with disability, so disability rights. So when it comes to curriculum, you kind of tailor it to the environment and also the philosophy of the school. And I'm quite lucky I got away with doing that because I've pretty much got a new team that has started. In terms of and also where everybody is at, they're actually much more experienced than me. They've been teaching longer than me, my team. I think I'm I am the youngest in the department. So they're really and truly at that stage of their career where, make my life easy for me. Do you get the vibes? I'm trying to. They're amazing. They are absolutely amazing, but they're pretty much at that stage of their career where it's just like, make my lives easier. So I think me coming in with all these resources, with this vision, was great. Whereas if I had a team which had I was a. I don't know how to be diplomatic here. If I had a team that, I guess, a few NQTs or early on in their career, I'd definitely invite them in a bit more. Not with, I can with experienced teachers, if that makes sense. But I just, from my own personal experience, I find like teachers within the younger stages of their career are really keen to make a mark, make a difference. They're really keen to put in more of a graft because they've got more of that kind of career energy left within them, if that makes sense.
No, I think
And I
Yeah.
think, Emily, as well,
Yeah.
I think the further on you go in your career, you realise actually that just the delivery is complicated enough. So if you've got a leader that's willing to say to you, here's the direction of travel, here's the resourcing, in your explanations, if you could really come up with the best metaphors for what it was like in, oh gosh, I'm going to show my terrible history knowledge, but what it was like in the Roman Empire or whatever, or some aspect of that, and you've got teachers that are really passionate about making sure they've got the right explanation, so that no misconceptions open up, then they're really happy for direction of travel because they know teaching's complicated enough without arguing about whether they should cover climate change in the Roman Empire as well as Julius Caesar's leadership style. They're like, they really, really want to know, what am I doing? Because I'm going to really focus in on expert delivery. So there's layers to it. You're absolutely right in what you're saying.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Todd. And it's also because we're dealing with, pretty much all of us, apart from one, are dealing with new kind of exam boards and exam requirements. So I had to think, as I mentioned before, I had a bit of an early start, so I was involved in timetabling. So I had to think, although I've changed this Key Stage 3, curriculum, trying to make it a bit more innovative, how can I'm also thinking about well-being and, the people in my staff, trying to make their job sustainable. So how can I reduce any cognitive load in terms of trying to grapple with further new things. So brought in those resources, the explanations are within the notes. All they have to really do is print. If they want to, what you call it, shave things off, add things in, they can. I'm not trying to, deplete anybody's autonomy, but I do, with that being said, because that's, resource, as well as Key Stage 4 is pretty much resourced as well. I just want you to focus on your subject knowledge of Key Stage 5, start writing some essay questions. Yesterday, for example, I organised CPD with a politics expert. It was because he's based in the UK, it was after hours, so it was 5 to 6. And I just said to the team, okay, because you gave me 1 hour, I'm going to give you 1 hour back. Here's my timetable. Whenever I'm free, I'll cover one of your lessons, choose which one. So I guess it's trying to, meet in the middle as well when it comes to curriculum, as well as trying to have in mind well-being and workload. I don't know if I've answered your question, Morgan.
No, I think you've gone further than that.
Oh,
And I think
really?
I want to come back to it. We're going to have a little break, and then I really want to come back to kind of two big things that you've talked about, which is CPD and curriculum when we're looking at department development. So just hold on, and we'll have a few words from our sponsor.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK. Home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development program, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
Welcome back. We are just discussing department development planning, and I'm here with Todd and Emily. And just coming back in, I wanted to pick up where Emily left off, and that was looking at things that you were doing at the beginning of the year when you're assessing the strengths and weaknesses of your department. Emily mentioned some things like, well, if you've got experienced teachers, it's basically giving them the tools that they need to focus in on this key stage, or we're going to be changing this scheme of work. Or if you have a bunch of NQTs, it's about giving them the mentorship that they need and the CPT that they require that's going to be really pertinent to them in that stage of their career. But I think what was interesting overall was both you and Todd, Emily, spoke about curriculum. So Todd, it was one of the very first things that you mentioned at the very top of the show, that if you're going to plan a department, you need to look at the curriculum first, that it is the main driver. And Emily, you mentioned the same thing, that if you are changing a course specification or your curriculum is evolving because the Key Stage 3 isn't working, or the context or the themes in Key Stage 3 need to be developed, that can really drive everything that you're doing that year. I know in some schools, there can be a huge drive to change a curriculum based on whole school strategic priorities. So if the school wants to bring in more things on well-being, so they might bring in the PERMA framework, you might ask that teachers bring that into as many different curriculum areas as possible. So you're building that in. If there's a drive for sustainability, then it's looking for those sustainable links in the curriculum, and that way you're deepening it. But besides that, there's just everyday changes that happen with curriculum. When we see updates that are coming, I teach geography, so I know that my curriculum changes almost by the week. We had a typhoon in Vietnam, and that meant that we completely changed what we were teaching this week in order to respond to that news. So when I think about curriculum development being a driver of department, it really is the very first thing and last thing that you look at when developing your department every single year. Todd, where would you start with that? And Emily, why don't I come to you after Todd?
No, I think I just want to pick up on something you said there. Yeah, you need to be, first of all, engaged with your subject. I get mixed up to Mary Myatt and I think it's Mary Myatt who said it. I'm going to go with it. But your subject is the baby version. It's the child version of your degree subject. So you need to be really in touch with what's going on in your actual field that you're dealing with. I think that's where the Geography Society and things like that really help out. Because things do update, even in a subject like mine, which is essentially about the human condition. If things change, our attitudes change and perceptions change and historical context knowledge changes. So yeah, that's absolutely fundamental, like you said, Morgan. But for me, the reason that you start with curriculum is because you don't know if anything good's happening until your curriculum is, has the requisite amount of challenge for the context and the kids that you're teaching. If the curriculum's really simple, you don't know which teachers are actually doing a good job. And you only know essentially that in Key Stage 3, which we can talk about as the powerhouse of your department, is everything at Key Stage 4 and 5 relies upon it. You don't know if what's happening there is any good, and so everything just becomes incredibly reactive. So a curriculum that's challenging and meets the field of study, so that the students are hitting the road later down the line, is absolutely fundamental to everything. That's why I think curriculum's so important in your departmental development. And as you said, I think when it doesn't change and stagnates for a long time, you also get teachers who lose that little bit of enthusiasm for things.
Yes, I completely concur.
And that's really dangerous, because if you've got people who are losing enthusiasm for the thing that they're being a cheerleader for, then as a student, and thinking back to my own time at school, Emily talked about her time at school. My English teacher, when she talked about Simon Armitage poetry, I thought she was going to fall off her seat. She used to sit on the tables and she'd talk about, a certain phrase of Armitage that Armitage has used. And this is the woman I've referred to several times who introduced us to T.S. Eliot in year 9. So she was kind of crazy. She would almost be falling off her seat with the joy of a certain phrase. And she must have taught it, thinking back, maybe for 4 years on the row by that point. So if teachers have taught Holes, there's nothing wrong with the novel Holes, but if they've taught it for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years at Key Stage 3, then there is an inevitable kind of lapse in their general enthusiasm for what they do. So that's why I put it at the front and centre. And what was your second part, Morgan, about CPD around the curriculum?
Well, I think there's kind of this necessary thing where if I'm looking at my department and I'm looking at where it's going, one of the key things I'm going to see is that at the end of Key Stage 4 and the end of Key Stage 5, I have exams. And that is what I'm answering to. That's my accountability. So if it's something like an exam board change is occurring, which can happen sometimes outside of your control. I've seen departments that have been forced to change their exam board in order to align better with the rest of the school. That means a complete rethink of your entire curriculum structure plan, what you're doing all the way down through to Key Stage 3. If there are changes in course specifications, you have to be willing to adapt to those and be responsive to them. So there's a lot that happens that sometimes in terms of curriculum is outside of your control. But you have to be the one that responds to it in a way that shows your adaptability as a leader. And you have to make sure that you make it as easy for your team as possible.
And I'm a big...
sorry.
Yeah, go. No, go. I was just going to say I'm a big fan of a 5 and 7 year knowledge organizer for that exact reason. I don't think the knowledge at Key Stage 4 and 5 should be totally fresh to students. I like to make sure when I'm designing a curriculum that if there's a mythological reference in Romeo and Juliet that they're going to see in Key Stage 4, that they've touched on some of those references in Key Stage 3, because it's enough to try and think about that text. It's enough to think about what Shakespeare was intending with that text and what message he was trying to say about families and, even the role of a patriarch, without then thinking about and why has he used that particular reference. So yeah, absolutely, fundamentally changes everything you do in terms of knowledge, just declarative knowledge. Emily, sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think that's part of what I personally see my my role as a middle leader as almost like, Henry VIII being called the defender of the faith when of the Pope wanted to make changes. Well, yeah, when the Reformation was starting to appear. So in that same likeness, I kind of see my job as a defender of the integral disciplines of history. So, for example, our Key Stage 3 current curriculum goes beyond and is much more ambitious than the IGCSE because in students' homework booklets, for example, they're grappling with they're grappling with academic historical texts. I remember I struggled at university my first year because I was so used to reading textbooks that I struggled with academic kind of language and literature, if I'm being completely honest. I didn't really encounter that academic rigor until I got to university because everything was available in my textbook and I was spoon-fed. So, I didn't want the same thing to be repeated. And within the history community, especially, amongst the historical association, as Todd mentioned about subject associations, there is this greater movement of, being integral to the disciplines, being integral to the skills of what a historian does, and actually ensuring that our inquiry questions and our unit of work are integral to what historians are actually arguing now. So, for example, traditionally, the first unit is that a Year 7 will encounter in the UK, for example, is why did William win the Battle of Hastings? No historian has written a book about why William won the Battle of Hastings. Instead, the debate is around the changes that occurred as a result of the Norman conquest, and therefore most history teachers, engaging with academic literature, change their inquiry. It's like, for example, when we go to a doctor, they're dealing with our lives, so we expect them to continually update their knowledge, continually, read. Otherwise, it's malpractice. And I think that's the same for, us as teachers, that continual engagement, whether it's listening to a podcast or, BBC Extra or whatever it looks like for you and your workload, to be engaging with that. So in terms of like designing the curriculum, you have to be integral to the discipline, almost like a defender trying to shave off. Like, I have this thing where I just ignore the white noise. I nod my head and I say, yeah, that's the school priority. Okay, great. Where does history fit into that? If it doesn't, then we're ignoring that and we're just going to teach excellent, outstanding history, because yes, we have to be, accountable to the results, which I really do agree with, but I'm also accountable to the uptake. I want to see a greater uptake, with history, because that's showing me, students are actually enjoying the subjects, and I really want students to enjoy the subject, and I really want to see that uptake increase.
Can we start a movement, Emily, to change the role of head of department, also head of history, to defender of the realm history?
Oh, yeah, I feel like defender of the discipline is a great title. I feel
so much better. I would feel so cool at dinner parties. Oh, and what do? You're an engineer. Well, I'm the defender of the realm English.
Yeah, honestly,
I think
I've
you said.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead, Emily.
I don't know. Now I've got a little group chat with other HODs, and like my key phrase is literally ignore the white noise, focus on teaching and learning, focus on what's going on in the classroom. That's my bread and butter of everything.
Yeah, and I agree with you about the disciplinary stuff as well, because, if we went outside to observe, let's say we were all senior leaders in a school, and we went outside to observe the PE department, and they were playing catch, and you asked them what they were doing, and they said basketball, you'd be like, you're catching tennis balls. What are you talking about? You're not doing basketball. And yet, how many English departments, for instance, have non-fiction, historical context reading built into their Key Stage 3 curriculum? That they exist, and they tend to be doing very well. But it's not writ into everyone's curriculum, and certainly even by Key Stage 5, there are schools that, as you said, they're spoon feeding. They're not setting off. We've had Lizardi Fisher on here talking about Harkness, where there's so much reading and so much disciplinary knowledge built in. There are schools that don't do that, that just spoon feed them. Right, this is the context you need to know, revise it, remember it. Do you need to know anything extra? No, that's it. We've just distilled it to the basics. And then those students go off thinking that they've got a grounding in English literature, and they go to university and they're just not ready.
And it's just like, this is my whole kind of bugbear, because, sorry, I'm going on a rant here, because Christine's Counsel, she's like an expert in, curriculum. I know you guys have heard of her. She said something so profound, and I think sometimes as, sometimes SLT can make, she said something like, you can't make history behave like science. And sometimes SLT falls into that trap. Each subject is very unique in its own right. So for example, your main priority might be challenge, and in, whole school priority might be challenge. And it's so easy to have like an extension task or challenge task, but actually history in some sources, source work, for example, in history, that is inherently challenged. So you might not explicitly see, a grade 7 and 9 task for challenge. There you go, challenge by resource. But if you know the subject well, you can see, and if you've got like a clear mental model of what outstanding history looks like, or English or science looks like, the observer will be able to see actually there's challenge there, and it's aligned to the discipline. I did, for example, I was teaching the year 8 today this week about British colonialism in India, and I was telling them a story, and they were hooked. If I was observed, that probably might get acceptable, because I'm standing up in the front telling a story. But if you were to see their faces, they were honestly really, 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 really hooked. And that's the another thing about history is that the word story is in there. There's a lot of storytelling, but an observer might come in and say, actually, that's bottom of the Bloom's taxonomy. There's no application going on there, but they enjoyed it. And when they do their memory task in the beginning of the lesson, I bet you they'll get 75%, which would be, as you guys know, 75% is outstanding. They'll get that in their memory task. But really and truly, it wasn't an outstanding lesson, because I was doing all the talking. Yeah. But I was asking questions, but I was doing the talking. I was being integral to the story element of history.
I love it when the stars align. I was literally going to interrupt you and say, you're basically describing the Cobra effect. I don't know if you've heard of this, but in British colonialism in India, they wanted to kill all the cobras. So Indians started breeding cobras to kill, which is what happens when you say, we need to see challenge in your lessons. So teachers are like, look, here's 10 really hard words that the observer's not going to know. I'll teach them these 10 words, and then they'll get signed off as having a challenging lesson. Whereas if the challenge is inherent in what you're doing, it's a lot harder to see for a non-subject specialist. It's literally that Cobra problem. So funny that you went straight to an example about British colonialism in India, because that's exactly what I had in my head.
I think it's really interesting. You guys have talked a lot about curriculum, and I think you said right at the top, actually, degree of difficulty. It's built in. So if you have an ambitious curriculum, you have an ambitious department. That degree of difficulty is really, really, really important. I want to come back to a few points. I wanted to kind of plant the seed before I put on the news that after this, now that we've kind of nailed the importance of curriculum and knowing and loving and defending your discipline, we look at implementation. We can plan things at the beginning of the year, we can anticipate, but it's really about the implementation that matters and the interventions that we make along the way. So we'll play the news and then we'll come back to this discussion.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK. Home home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development program, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Exclusion rates are in the news again, with BBC North East and Cumbria focusing on a study which says North East England will continue to have the highest rate of children being excluded and suspended from schools. According to research by think tank IPPR and charity The Difference, Redcar and Cleveland, Middlesbrough, Hartlepool and Newcastle are amongst the highest in the area for exclusion rates. The report highlights a direct link between deprivation in the region and high suspension and exclusion figures. Middlesbrough Council responded by saying it was a trend we are determined to reverse. Middlesbrough's exclusion rate is 28.1% and is 3 times the national average, with Redcar and Cleveland's even higher at 32.7%. The research concludes that the correlation between poverty and exclusion would make regional divides harder to tackle. Others pointed to lack of resources, specialist staff, and a lack of freedom with curriculum as further pressures schools and pupils face. A spokesperson for the Department for Education said the rising numbers were shocking and showed the massive scale of disruptive behaviour that has developed in schools. The spokesperson went on to say the Department for Education was committed to providing access to specialist mental health professionals in every school and ensuring earlier intervention in mainstream schools for pupils with special needs. The Guardian has more details on the figures across England on its website. In Northern Ireland, schools are being advised to restrict pupils' use of mobile phones during the school day. Education Minister Paul Givan issued new guidance which also applies to limiting use at break and lunch times. He said there was a growing evidence that phones distract children from learning. He also said the guidance would allow teachers to do what they do best, teach. Mr. Givan pointed out that many countries across the world are increasingly taking steps to stop phone use at school, and that the new guidance would allow schools in Northern Ireland to be fully aware of the latest evidence and practical advice. The guidance is being accompanied by a pilot of phone-free solutions, including inviting expressions of interest from schools to use pocket-sized pouches which phones will be placed in. The pouch is then closed by using a magnetic latch. UNESCO, the United Nations Education and Science body, has also previously advised that smartphones should be banned from schools. The previous guidance to schools in Northern Ireland on mobile devices was 8 years old and mainly focused on possible educational uses of phones. In a week that has seen the announcement of the abolishment of 1 or 2 word inspection grades, as well as other changes to Ofsted inspections, the Church of England has released a report which highlights the positive impact of moving away from such gradings. The annual SIAMS inspection report, which can be found on the Church of England website, outlines key recommendations to support continuous improvement in church schools. The report reveals what it calls a smooth transition away from single word grades to a more compassionate, contextual approach to accountability. Under the new framework, over 99% of SIAMS inspections in the last academic year were described as less stressful but more robust. This is a contrast to the BBC's reporting that Ofsted's response to a head teacher's suicide following a school inspection was defensive and complacent. Dame Christine Gilbert's independent review was commissioned after an inquest into the death of Ruth Perry. Ofsted's Chief Inspector, Sir Martin Oliver, accepted most of the review's findings. The findings come after the government scrapped the overall gradings for inspections. Further details of the review can be found across media outlets. Schools Week reports that Ofsted has named the members of 7 new external reference groups that will offer independent advice and challenge as it embarks on reforms. The groups will meet 3 times a year and between them will discuss and challenge Ofsted's data, research and evaluation plans and act as expert advisors on their specialities. They will also advise on any proposed developments and give advice on aspects of training relating to leader and staff well-being. The full list of members can be found on the Schools Week website, but they include recognisable names such as Chris Patterson from the Education Endowment Foundation, Claire Seeley from the States of Guernsey, and Matt Hood of Oak Academy, who will be focusing on curriculum. The Behaviour and Attendance Group includes Tom Bennett of Researcher Ed and Catherine Roper from Wiltshire Police, as well as Sarah Clark from the National Network of Parent Carer Forums. Other reference groups will focus on inclusion, well-being of leaders and staff, early years and social care, and insights and education. Finally, a US court has charged a father in relation to a school shooting allegedly committed by his 14-year-old son. The gun attack resulted in the death of 4 people at a school in Georgia. The 14-year-old is charged with 4 counts of murder, whilst his father is charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter and child cruelty. They are the most severe charges brought against a parent after a school shooting, and the judge in the case told the 54-year-old father he could face up to 180 years in prison. He is accused of allowing his son to possess an AR-15 style rifle, which is alleged to have been used in the attack. The case has again prompted discussion about gun laws, school safety, and the responsibility of parents for the criminal actions of their children. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Welcome back. I'm with Todd and Emily, and we are going to be discussing department planning and being defenders of our discipline. Todd, why don't you start us off with a question?
Yeah, so I think we've had enough of me. You can't have too much of a good thing, they always say. So, Morgan, we'll start with you and just having a little think about, we were all kind of in a rough consensus, eh? So what do you think a plan looks like for how you then implement everything we've discussed, implementing that curriculum and that leadership model that we've discussed?
Well, I think we've basically said that curriculum is the very first thing, that it's at the forefront of your mind when you are looking at your department and how your department is going to develop. Curriculum is the driver for everything. But I'd say that if we're thinking about implementation, you have to be very logical and think, okay, what drives my team? What's the data that is going to be our measure for success? How are we organizing ourselves and using timelines? And this sounds quite dry, like I'm filling in a template, but I think it doesn't need to be. When I think about things like having a timeline, what I mean is, where do I want my department to be in 5 years? I always think about, okay, if I have this idealized version of a department, how do I expect it to have grown? What kind of curriculum does that look like? How are students optioning my subject because they love it? what is the enrichment that goes beyond what's happening in the classroom look like? So I idealize that dream department. And then I think, well, how are we going to get there from here? And I think I do have that perspective because my very first head of department post was at a startup. So I really was thinking, okay, the school is going to grow extremely quickly. I'm going to be able to hire staff really quickly. And I get to start with the curriculum that I want. So there isn't as much history or any institutional memory that can really hold you back sometimes. So I do like thinking about, okay, where do I really see this department in 5 years? So I think timelines are actually really important because if you know what you want in 5 years, you can break it down into what I want to accomplish this year that's going to get me on that path. I think all of that can only really happen if you have team buy-in. So helping your department get there means that you have your team involved in co-constructing that vision. So your team right from the get-go is sitting down and looking at a blueprint and saying, okay, if we are looking at our department, we're not just looking at the results that we got in over the summer. We are looking full picture. Those results are part of that, but we are looking full picture at the shape and flavor of all of our upcoming cohorts. We're looking at on the horizon and scanning what might be important for our school priorities and how they fit into this that we have. And we're also looking at challenges ahead of time. If you're working with your department, it's kind of good to say, well, if we're changing the curriculum at Key Stage 3, what do you think will and will not work? You need to conduct pre-mortems so that those grumblers or those naysayers or those people who are really contradictory that are good to have a discussion with, Todd, that you can get them on board and that you can actually address their concerns in a really open and honest way. Because you can plan all you want, but culture eats planning for breakfast. So I think when you sit down to department plan, you need those very logistical things as a framework to drive the discussion in a realistic way so that implementation actually happens.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of pre-mortems. I think they're great. Just why will this fail? It's such a simple question. But like you all get excited and then you just need one killjoy in the room to go, right, this is great, isn't it? Why is it going to fail? And if you've got those people in the room, then absolutely. And Emily's just picked up in the chat with that phrase, culture eats breakfast. I forget who the originator of that is, but it's such a true aphorism. I was going to say anaphorism, that's to the time. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Emily, you're excited by all of Morgan's lovely phrases there.
It just made me think.
What about you? What do you think in terms of implementation?
No, this is CPD for me, honestly. I can listen to both of you like forever. I really liked what Morgan said about that pre-mortem. So what comes with I'm not as great as you, Todd, because what comes with my control frenzy, I forgot how you rephrased it, is that I don't want to hear how it's going to fail. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to know how it's going to fail. I'm not going to lie about that. We're going to do it, and that's the highway, and it's going to work.
Yeah, but, control enthusiasm, and it's easy to do. It's easy to fall in that trap of what you talked about because you need then once you've done the pre-mortem to just switch back to positivity. But we're going to make it work because it's important. So that's not some special sauce, Emily. Your enthusiasm will see most things through, I'm sure. But please, carry on.
No, but listening to Morgan, I actually have to do that. Like it's really important. So thanks for that. I definitely will do that moving forward. Because I do have to develop. I know my weaknesses as a leader, as a person, and I do have to, plug in those gaps, and that's one of them. So in terms of implementation, I'll never forget one friend said to me, and Todd said something similar when I was seeking his advice about my handbook. This friend said basically, make sure you create structures in place that if you weren't there for a long period of time, the department can run. And Todd said something similar to me when I was doing the handbook. So God forbid if I was off sick for a long period of time, the handbook should serve as a way to kind of just the department just runs as normal. So when it comes to implementation, for me, it's all about putting those clear structures and systems. So something like a scheme of work, for example, I don't spend hours on that. I don't really do one, to be honest, because nobody ever reads them. So it's about having clear folders on the system. Like this is our mark, so I'll put the topic of the folder with a marking point. I'm really hot when it comes to folder. I've got a whole kind of folder etiquette in my handbook about, I don't want any version 2s. I don't want any initials next to it, because I'm really OCD when it comes to folder organization, because it just impinges on people's workload, because you're thinking about which resource is better. No, we're going to have clear baseline clear base lessons that you can just pick and use or alter suited to your kind of style of teaching. So that's number one, having those clear systems, is clear folders. You know precisely, week 1 I'm teaching this, week 2, lesson 2 I'm teaching this, just to make it really clear, because nobody's really going to spend time looking at a scheme of work, and we don't have time when you've got like 9 or 10 periods a day. Clear assessments as well, with clear marking schemes within those folders. And I also start to put into the folders, as time goes on, model examples, which I've started to do with politics, because it's quite new. So every time I mark, if there's somebody that's got almost full marks or hit the level 5, level 4, I scan that in, so that for next year, or if there's a new member of staff, they've got a clear mental model of what a level 4, level 5 answer looks like. Also CPD. So for example, I've introduced, a unit of work on the Islamic Golden Age, and there's some people in the department that don't know anything about that. So obviously it's not going to land in the way that I probably want, because I've created the lessons and I've got a clear idea of how I want it kind of landing in the classroom. So ensuring that, within the notes section, that staff are reading that, but also offering kind of time and CPD to plug in those gaps. Because I don't know about you, but I'm guilty of the past, especially my early years of teaching, spending longer periods of times on the units that I like to teach and that I'm confident in subject knowledge, and then kind of skimming over the bits that I don't like and I don't feel confident in. But actually, we all need to be at a certain place at a certain time. So none of that, please. Here's the CPD, and there's no excuse. And also, I'm introducing something called sharing good practice walks. So I like to teach with the door open personally, so that anybody can pop in. However, sometimes I do close it because there's noise in the corridor, which means I do have to close it. But just creating that culture within the department that actually come and see some of this stuff in action, and instead of calling it like a learning walk or learning review, calling it basically sharing good practice walks, to actually see, we model in the classroom, exam technique or how we want a task completed, but actually modeling how the implementation of how the curriculum should look like through this sharing good practice walks. Oh, I'm about to teach, or KPD, the rise of KPD and communism in Germany. This is a hard concept for students to grapple. Come in and watch me teach it, or I've just seen, I don't know, Louise teach X, Y, and Z. Make sure you go and pop into her class to see that in action, just to create that sort of culture. So yeah, those are, I guess, for implementation, it's all about those structures and systems. And also something that I didn't do in the UK because we didn't need it. So in the UK, in schools, it's quite stable and retention is quite stable, whereas here, is quite transient, and with every new employee comes new ideas, new frameworks, new mental models, and whatever. So in the UK, I never really needed a handbook because the department actually kind of run itself. Whereas in an international setting, I really do feel that handbooks are really much needed. I never really saw the necessity until being in an international school. So having a clear handbook, and as Todd advised me, that can ensure, and it's very clear as to how the department should run, just so that if anything, God forbid, was to happen to myself, they've got kind of almost like a Bible, so just to follow. Yeah.
I think your friend was cheerier than me. I think I said to you, I always imagine, will this stuff run if I drop dead? Which is so dark. But I genuinely used to think, like, will they know how to run this if? And although it's a ridiculous thing to think, like, you need to kind of know there's absolute clarity on those things. And I love what you said, Emily, about as well, popping into next door and having an open door. I think as a middle leader, it's so important to model good drop-in etiquette. So dropping in and being, if you see something that you think can be improved, doing something like, Miss, do you mind if I just try something? I've been trying something with my groups and I just want to see how it works. If you see something they're not doing, so that you've modeled something for them that can be amazing. But equally, seeing the positive, accentuating the positives when you pop in a room and spotting the good. Because I always used to say to my team, the best CPD is probably next door. Because, we had such a fantastic team at several points, not throughout the journey, but at some points I was blown away by how great my team were. Your best CPD is literally next door. I've learned so much from all of you, and you should be doing that from each other. And that's really important as well as sort of saying, I made a mess of that lesson there. I think a lot of middle leaders are a bit scared to do that because it looks as though you maybe shouldn't be in charge. But actually, having that humility means that people are more likely to pop into you. And as I said earlier, chances are, if you're not the best, you're one of the best in your department. And so you're the best CPD often for your teams. But so absolutely the handbook and the drop-ins are so important. Morgan, did you want to pick up on that? Emily said so many amazing things.
I think I'll just close this off with 3 points before we have our last ad break, and then we'll have some final thoughts from all of us. But I was just thinking, just to kind of condense what you've both said, I think that it's not so much in case you go away, but building a department is really legacy building. You get to create it. You are being handed this mantle for an amount of time, but the department will continue on without you. So you are leaving it with the best policies, with the best interventions, with the best resources. You are helping to improve every single team member who goes through that department. So when you leave, they're going to take the knowledge, the expertise, and the sharing culture that you've created, and they're going to give that to the next person that's coming in the department. So I think legacy building is really key. Part of that legacy, the second part, is those systems and clarity. So like Emily mentioned, folder etiquette matters. The way that we organize our resources, that is a battle, because we are basically saying this gives clarity to our larger goals and our assessments. So it's really important that we do have clarity within a department, and resource planning and making that really clear. That's part of our department development. And then the third thing,
North American is more positive than Lancashire Northern Mail from England.
But I think the last thing is this idea of this atmosphere of professional respect and collaboration. So if you establish that in your department, that's not something that's necessarily going to be like priority 3.2 on your department development plan. You can do things to put that in place, but that atmosphere of professional respect, that starts with you modeling that behavior and appreciating your colleagues, and it can make a huge difference. So I'm going to just have our last word from our sponsors before we come back. This has been going really quickly, so save your thoughts because we have a whole bunch more to discuss.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK. Home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development program, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
This is
Welcome back. I'm so glad to have you all. We're continuing our discussion on development planning for departments and what it means to really develop your discipline. We've been talking a lot about legacy, about systems, and about CPD. Emily, one of the things that struck me when you were saying, we were just talking about your week before, was that you had arranged some after-school CPD because you wanted to make sure that something new for your department, that you had given them something that they could then learn with. So when you look at CPD throughout the entire year for your department, did you map that out? Was this a one-off? Do you look for gaps in the curriculum and then like department-specific or subject-specific CPD to fill in that? What's your process? Are you just kind of like, this is an opportunity, let's exploit it?
Yeah, so my process specifically with my new context was, so basically I'm a head of history and politics. In my first 2 years of teaching, I taught politics, and I haven't taught politics since, so I'm out of the loop of politics. The new person that they've hired as well, he's amazing, but he hasn't taught politics before. And the other person, he hasn't really taught politics. He's taught politics before, but not extensively, if that makes sense. So collectively, there's, a weak link there. So got in touch with an expert. He kindly offered his time, and it was online, despite it being after school. So what I actually did was, in ADEC, not ADEC, sorry, in the UAE, we have to do, these CEFs, and I was moaning to Todd about it because how much I hate data. And he says, you need to fall in love with data. I'm like, I did not come into the profession to be a data analyst. But nevertheless, he was right. Because what came through, especially my favorite part of I'm saying favorite part of the data, but my favorite aspect of analyzing the data was more so the Results Plus. So at Excel, they have something called Results Plus, and you can see paper by paper, the weakest link, and question by question. So I was able to map up CPD based on what came out of the data. And I was able to lean on some of the expertise in the department, but most of the expertise I'm leaning on to lead the CPD is my wider network on LinkedIn, on X or Twitter, as you call it. And I've just got in touch with people and I said, would you be able to offer CPD, at any time that's convenient for you? Most of them are based in the UK. So it means there's going to be sessions that's going to be after school, 5 to 6 p.m. But I've said to staff, because I do have a bit more free periods than them, you've got my timetable. If there's anything that, if I'm organising CPD that cuts in beyond your designated time, please take up the offer of me allowing me to cover one of your lessons to give you back that time, because time is precious. So I'm also aware of being a good resource manager in terms of protecting staff time. In terms of that. But with that being said, they were really grateful for that CPD because the person that led it, he went through question by question breakdown. I felt confident to write my own. I sent him actually my answer to that question. So basically I map out the CPD based on the data in terms of the the exams, if that makes sense. Um,
No, that makes a lot of
yeah,
sense. Yeah. And I love that you've fallen in love with data, because I think that's
I
all heads of
haven't, to be
department.
honest,
We
Morgan.
start off hating it and then we love it.
You have to. You
Yeah.
have to.
Uh,
And I like as well, Emily, that leading from the front. I'm sure being a history buff, you've definitely seen the episode of Blackadder where they say, we'll be supporting you. And then someone chips in and says, from 30 miles back here. You're leading from the front there. I'm aware this is going to take some of your time. So I'm going to be there to support you. I'm going to actually be on the front line with you. I'm not hiding away. I'm going to give you this time back. I think that's phenomenal, because your team will work double hard for you for that, because you've given them great CPD and you've also appreciated that it cost them some of their time. And that from a well-being point of view, that's really, I think that's really strong middle leadership. If I was listening to this as a new middle
Thank
leader,
God.
I'd be taking heavy notes on that.
Thank you.
Is that something you
Yeah.
think about a lot
I
in
think
terms
that
of
there's
well-being?
Yeah, I do, because some of my department, have children as well, and I believe, like, actually, you invested so much into other children. Please spend time with your own. Also, I want the job to be sustainable. I want them to actually enjoy it as well. It creates that stability. And happy teachers means happy students. So if I'm looking after the teachers, I'm looking after the students. So thinking about, for example, marking wise, I think it's sustainable. Create a marking policy where it's hinged on well-being and workload, but also evidence informed. And yeah, so it's just really paramount for me, because I really want I want staff to stay. I want them to enjoy it as well. I really want to work with happy teachers.
That is so powerful. I think one of the things that stuck out to me is when you gave the example of, I'm gonna ask you to do this, but I'm gonna give you something back. I think that's a really great leadership role, that if you're ever gonna add something to someone's workload, you should also take something away. I think that's a really powerful way to ensure that there is well-being. I think it's also, if you have a great big department plan that you want to execute, it's not so much about saying, well, I'm going to parcel out and delegate this planning in year 9 to this person and this GCSE unit of work to this person, and we're all going to then share it together, because that seems like a very tepid version of leadership. What it comes down to is kind of collaborating really honestly and together. And I think that also means collaborating on things like policies. You spoke about, oh, well, we're going to have a well-being policy that's actually really more about feedback and marking. So in our department, when we look at our feedback and marking, it's going to be evidence informed. We are going to be looking at how we can make it effective and efficient for our staff, and how we can make it easier for each other by creating shared resources that is a bank for us to use to give the best feedback to our students, and make sure that it's easy for us to follow as well. There's that clarity that's alongside it. So there's a lot there to unpack, like good systems that you have in place to make sure that your department planning actually gets done, because you've created that atmosphere, you've created the time, you've created the energy, you've created the resources and the collaboration for that to occur.
Can I just add something, Morgan? So when I came in our first meeting, I said, okay, right, after we shared the vision, the next thing was, let's create a well-being charter. I could see some of their faces looked a bit surprised, but it was really quite useful to have, because I think it's just really, it's fundamental. And it's not just a thing because ADET's got well-being on the, on its framework, but it's actually like, mental health is actually a real thing. There's times in my life where I couldn't get out of bed. Do you know what I mean? But I don't want anybody to dread coming into work, and that's exasperated whatever they've been feeling or whatever's going on at home. So people have lives outside of work, and it's important to actually remember that as well.
Yeah, I love what you said about, as someone who has 3 children, knowing that I am most effective when I have those hours in work. Everything that I do outside of work, it's just not as effective. Those hours that I spend after 7 p.m. or 7:30 when I've got the kids in bed, you're drained a little bit. So I want to maximize the time that I have in my school day. So yeah, I think that's really, really true. I love that you've done a well-being charter. because it shows right away that you're protective of staff. And again, your staff are the drivers. Your team is a team. It's not one person kind of like leading from behind, as Todd would say. I think we're coming almost to the end. And I wanted to wrap up with just some final thoughts about what sticks out to you, the principles of good department planning, if you will. So maybe a few principles each that we think that we would take away and give maybe to a new HOD as like the things that they should most pay attention to. Todd, can I come to you first? Because you started off this episode, I think, with a few of those key principles, and I have them starred. I've been furiously taking notes.
Well, I suppose I've probably changed them as I've gone on, as I've been listening to all of us. But I really like what Emily said about defending your subject. I think that's a really good founding principle, that you're very invested in your disciplinary subject, and that you see yourself as the defender of it, and someone who's trying to ignite passion in the students with and through your team. I know it's tedious, but a lot of middle leadership isn't really sexy and exciting. Having those policy documents, having that handbook, having all that administrative stuff and being really clear and on top of it, it's not natural to a lot of us who have that passion and desire to make things better and create things that are brilliant. But it's so important. And it was a colleague of mine actually who taught me that. So those would be my two key principles, I suppose, of departmental improvement. And something we haven't touched on, and I almost feel like there's another episode in this, is about quality assurance, but it's about quality assurance with heart. Emily's spoken there about, wanting to look after her team. And, I'm in the same situation as you, Morgan. I've got 3 children also. When you feel that from the people line managing you, that they care about you as a person, it makes such a difference. So we didn't touch on quality assurance, but doing that with a great deal of heart, I think, is also important. But gosh, it's hard to narrow it down even to 3. I'll stop there.
Emily, what do you have for us? What are your final thoughts? Oh, Emily, I think you're still muted.
So I didn't realize. What's really stuck with me is culture eats planning for breakfast. So really like thinking about culture building so that it underpins everything I'm trying to build. Clarity as well, and something I don't think I've mentioned so much is if you're a new HOD, obviously don't be afraid to be assertive. I think we can fall into that trap of trying to be liked. I don't really care if I'm not liked. I'm very integral and principled, but I've got the best intentions at heart. But I'm not afraid anymore to be assertive. And once you said your first no, it becomes easier. So yeah, don't be afraid to be assertive. That's another one.
I love that. I think I'm kind of taking these pieces from both of you. I kind of have gone on the defend theme in terms of how I would kind of summarize this episode. I love the fact that the first thing you do is defend your discipline. So that idea that your discipline, you are head of department because you love your discipline so much. And that enthusiasm is contagious. And sometimes that discipline means that you are constantly going out and developing yourself and getting that expert knowledge and giving it to your team. And that example, Emily, of you making sure that you have expert knowledge and that you have that extra CPD available for your team is so important. And loving your curriculum means constantly developing it. I don't know who I was talking to recently, but Key Stage 3, that curriculum is never done. It is forever evolving. No matter what happens, Key Stage 3 is always something that can be perfected, get better, that changes depending on the cohort, on what's happening in the world. So I think that it's one of those things that we have to love our curriculum, and we also have to allow it to grow and evolve in interesting ways and make sure that we adapt ourselves, that we're adaptable to it. I guess the next thing is defend your staff. So we can defend our discipline, but I think when you talk about things like a well-being charter, or we look at policies that are effective and friendly, defending your staff is pretty important. So making sure that as a middle leader and as a head of department, that you are actually pretty protective of your staff's time and energy and resources, that you are giving them everything that they need. And that could be clarity and organization structures. You are defending your staff in the sense that you're on their side. And that means that you're also walking with them through the hallways so that they can see you in action and you can see them in action. So making sure that you have that collegial and professionalism and respect for each other so you can kind of share the joy of teaching and learning. And I guess the last thing it always comes down to is defend your students. Because they're at the heart. So a lot of your job as a head of department is to make sure that everything that you change, and it is a lot of change management, is making sure that it is for the best reason, which is for the good of the students, and making sure that you engender a love of your subject in those students, and that whatever you teach them, they love it. I had a discussion with a colleague earlier today, actually, about curriculum intent. And we were talking about every single department have a curriculum intent statement and what that really meant. And we were saying that if you're having a curriculum intent statement, you are saying, okay, this is what students will get out of my subject. This is what I want them to have at the end of it. And we were saying that at the end of the year, if you are a teacher who's writing year 9 comments at the end of the year report, it should be really important to you to write those end of year reports for year 9, because even those students that haven't optioned your subject and they aren't continuing on with it, you want to be able to celebrate the journey that they've been on and what they've gotten out of it. So by putting that larger intent at the very heart of everything that you're building in your department, for me, if I was a geographer, that would be creating incredibly dynamic activists and global citizens. That's my end goal, not necessarily that they could get a good grade at the end of GCSE geography. I think that kind of keeps your students at the heart of it when you're doing development planning. So yeah, defend your discipline, defend your staff, and defend your students at the heart of what you're building. I think that finishes us off for today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in, and I'd really like to thank Todd and our incredible guest, Emily. Emily, as always, I appreciate your insight. We're going to have you again on the show because I could talk to you all day, and it's so lovely to touch base after such a long summer. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you both of you. I think that'd be a fantastic thing to do, is to do another one on that exact same topic. It's really great.
Thank you so much. And when we touch on it, Morgan, let's touch on being a female leader a bit as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a podcast in the making. That is next to come. Okay, deal. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Great afternoon.
Have a lovely weekend. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.